Hello everyone, I'm Xiao Gang. Okay, here we will look at adding the reply notifier condition. First of all, under this condition, you can use the drive lifetime condition notifier. Then, the new notifier has two parameters. This parameter determines whether to call the reply notifier. If you choose always, it will always execute the reply notifier. If you choose reply notifier on change, then it will only execute the reply notifier when the property value changes. And the previous one, looking further down, this copy condition reference means that this copy condition reference controls whether to copy. This thing controls whether, after copying, this change will occur, right? This is what happens. That is whether this reply notify will be called. If one type is always called, the other type is called only when changed. Specifically, let's look directly at the source code. There's a comment here. This lifetime is an enum. Here is an explanation for you. That is on the client side, when it receives this value, whether it will call report, notify this situation. And here, there are some situations about whether replication occurs. So let's take a quick look. This is the reference to the replication condition. Obviously, we generally use this compact none. This way, it works. As long as it changes, it will replicate that value from the server, but sometimes this value does not actually need to be replicated to all clients. So for example, this value only needs to be replicated to its proxy. So in what situation does it only need to be replicated to the proxy? For example, health and mana need to be replicated to all clients, but stamina does not. Why is that? Because stamina may only need to be controlled locally and on the server to control the character, whether it can perform specific actions, while other clients don't care about your stamina value. Then we can use this sorta muted, not sorta muted, it's this owner ordering, which only replicates to its owner. This way, we reduce the bandwidth pressure. If you want better control over properties, you can use some other ret by specifying that struct to control it. But in this case, the higher the level of control you have, the relatively greater the overhead will be. That's the situation. You can also replicate through this custom property map, because sometimes you decide to copy. You cannot simply decide based on his character. Maybe you need to base it on the server. For example, this player, he is a super ammo state. Then you might have some information that you don't need to sync to the client, or some other effects, or the player is invincible. Or when you are using a special state, some information may not need to be synced. Then you can customize and use it. Now we will guide you through writing these related things. Okay, let's still go one by one. Here, let's first create an AC tour. Let's go back to our project. Okay, we have successfully created this class. So let's run a test on this class. Alright. Let's first assign a value here. For example, this value, we will give it an indicator. It is a value that synchronizes between the server and the owning client. In this case, we are simulating the replication condition of the owner, but there is a special case that here, this object may not have an owner. So here we will take the opportunity to review the concept of the owner. Okay, here we won't use health. We'll just use owner say. This is an int variable that only the owner can see. Then we copy this function over here. We should place it here. Then we create the corresponding one here. We can just copy it directly here. Okay. Then we only let the owner see this thing. Move this variable over here. And this is it. Then in tick, we do this. We add a tick here. This one. On our dedicated server, we continuously sync this integer, this int value. Okay. He keeps synchronizing on the dedicated server. Then on the client side, you also need to print it. So we set this up on this side. On the server, we don't need to print it. This server can obviously perceive it. So we print it on the client side. Okay, then on the client side, we give it to the client. Then we print out this health value. This should be a print string. Okay, now let's start it. Obviously, we started now. Actually, this value, its clients should all be 0. Because it has no owner, it will only replicate to the owner. So we should give it an owner. This way it can perceive this value. So we will demonstrate this for everyone. Then we need to create a new map because we might need to write some code. We put this map here. We are level. We give a condition. Okay. Okay, then we might need to create this blueprint. Such a class. Here, we create this. Put it here. Drag it into the scene. At this point, the result of it winning is probably not what you expected. Let's check it. We found that our code actually wrote it into begin play, move it into tick. I made a typo while searching. We have successfully changed it now. Here we move it into this tick. I just made a typo because my hand slipped. Not writing a root node here doesn't affect anything because we don't really need to move it. So in this case, this is a blueprint. It automatically added it for us. Now let's start it again. You will notice that this value here is changing. The reason for this change is clearly wrong. So how do we fix this error? Obviously what it means is that in our case here, we did not enable replication for it. So in fact, this form of expression is definitely in because it means that every character has this authority permission. So that is not right. Let's first enable replication. And then we will test it again for everyone. This is a very good mistake to demonstrate to everyone. And now let's start it up again. We haven't changed the map just now. Let's check again. And then we can see over here. This one is 0. See? This is 0, right? So how do we make it more aware of this chain? Then inside the boot point, let me correct this first. This 0 here, let's comment this out first. After commenting it out, it is indeed this A. Because I opened the wrong map just now. I opened the wrong map here. Let's still link them together. First, enable this copy. Sorry about that. That's correct here. First, make sure to enable this copy. Don't worry about this part for now. Let's enable the copy first. Then we need to, in this level blueprint, in the service level blueprint, we need to complete a switch for player control. Only then will everyone see the full effect. This part can be a bit confusing. Let's go over it again. We must jump to this map. Just now, jumping to the map. Jumping into this boot point. Okay, first let's sort out the logic here. Then we'll make a here at this begin play point. We need to do it this way. Of course, this approach is not very standard. We need a delay, but generally, we shouldn't use too many delays. In this blueprint, let's set it to 2 seconds. Because we need to start the DS server first. Only then will the client login produce this effect. Then we find this object in the scene. We go back to our level blueprint. Then we get its reference here. After getting this reference, we give it a set owner. At this point, we should have 2 player controllers because we have all the player controllers on the server. So we get the first player's player controller, set its owner. Then at this point, let's observe something interesting will happen after 2 seconds. You get my point, right? That is, in this place, it is actually this thing for the first player. It successfully senses that this attribute needs to be updated. You can think of this attribute as stamina. Then you can, in this place. Actually, if you do this, you should be able to get one. If you try to get others, there will be problems. Because we only have 2 players. It actually only has these 2 controllers. You will notice that this value has changed up and down. So this is what I wanted to show you. Okay. Oh, okay, let's double check it again, because just now there was something. Just now the organic side wrote it wrong. The final version should look like this. Okay, let's correct the mistake now. Because when setting the owner, when I checked just now, I found that our condition should be in this graph. It seems we forgot to distinguish whether it is the server, so we should check whether it is on a dedicated server. We need to change this owner on our server. That way it will be correct. And actually in this place, the client cannot obtain this player index. Why is that? Because on the client, there is only one player controller. So you should do it like this here. You should do it like this. Although the visual result seemed fine just now, actually there is a problem here. Okay. Alright, how do we verify it? Actually, we are currently on the server. If we were on the client, we could do this. Let's add a sequence to verify it for everyone. If we are the client, we get the local controller. Then this place must always be wired. It must always be wired. We can get the print. The client's first controller is valid. Then we got the second one. I still need to emphasize this point because I noticed that when I was explaining this just now, I missed you. The second controller is invalid. We can take a look. It should be this. Let's execute it now. Let's execute it in this way. We open 2. You can see that it has correctly pulled them out. It is proven to be in line with our expected judgment. Then why didn't it report an error just now? The reason it didn't report an error is actually because of this set owner. It can be set to empty. This is allowed. That is to say this ownership can be set to empty. So this part has a generative logic judgment. In fact, on the server, I am on the server now. We go to get these 2 objects. Both of them are valid. We can make a judgment. I'll write it here for everyone like this. Let's change this to server. Because here we are doing a delay. Because if you don't do a delay when the client hasn't logged in yet, then it will definitely be invalid. Then you do a delay, and when it logs in, it will become valid. Because initial, you definitely don't have it. So this place must be server. The second controller is valid. Let's change this meeting time to be longer. Change it to 10 seconds. Okay. Good. Let's execute it now. So let me show you this again here. Take a look. You must have this concept. You absolutely must have this concept. As for this owner, it must be set on the server. Set it on the server, then let the server automatically see the changes. If you change it on the client, there might be issues because this link may not match. For details, please read this document and gain a deeper understanding. It will become quite clear once you do.